Hi gang! Well, it's here. Finally, after 5 years of waiting for a card that can truly run 4K gaming with all max settings, and now with RTX on, we have the 3080 series. And I opted for a For the Win 3 from EVGA. I've always liked EVGA's cards. So we all know this is not easy to get, these 3080s. Everybody has to
get in line. Nothing can come between us.
Yeah. So I am lucky to have one of these. Thanks to a shout out to Canada Computers for getting this to me in 30 days, which relatively speaking is quick because a lot of people may not see one of these cards until the new year. And we're going to look at the difference between the card I currently have, which is the 2080 XC Ultra from EVGA, which is also a phenomenal card, great overclocking card. It's really been fine for 4K, of course not always max settings, been very happy with it, but this has just got twice the power, as we all know. So in this video we're not going to focus a lot on benchmarks. We're going to look at running one just for comparison, because I think that's warranted, using Tomb Raider or Shadow of the Tomb Raider. But I really look at the physical differences between these cards. The power requirements for this guy are substantially different, and the connections are different. We're also going to look at the option for a new BIOS, an overclocking BIOS, and standard BIOS actually from EVGA, and some of the CPU suggestions for running this card versus this card. In terms of the boxes, just before we open this one, because I actually haven't even opened it yet, I noticed that there's a little bit less material, which is always good to see, but I did notice that DLSS is actually mentioned now on the box, whereas it wasn't in this case, and I think that's because it actually works now. DLSS with 2.1, and some games, of course, implementing it really look good, like Control and now Death Stranding, which I'm currently playing, really look good with this, and then the frame rates are, boosted up to 50%. So if you have a lower RTX card, you can get up to 4K performance with not even a 2080. So that's really nice. That's being well implemented by NVIDIA. So with that said, I think we'll get this guy opened and get it in the case, and talk about some of the things I just mentioned. So stay tuned.
You know what? Second thought, I don't think I'll use a chainsaw on this box this time. I might just hit the card.
Okay, so we have the two cards side by each now. Pulled the 2080 out of the case. And I think it's useful to first take a look at the 3080. This is a big, heavy card. 3-fan design versus a 2-fan design on the 2080. And importantly is this thing. 3 8-pin connectors. Now there are some cards from MSI and Asus, and I think Gigabyte as well, have these 3 8-pin designs for beefier power requirements. This guy's going to draw up to 400 watts without the new BIOS. The new BIOS, 450 watts. I'll show you a little bit about that in a minute. Yeah, this is going to light up when we put it in the case. A couple of things I want to show are some neat features. The debatable and much talked about smiley or Batmobile design on the back. But there's a 4-pin connector for a fan here, which I think is quite useful. If you want to have your rear fan or a fan in your case temperature controlled, or sorry, speed controlled by the temperature of the GPU. So that's nice 4-pin connector there. And then of course on the back of the card, where is it exactly now? Here, there it is. I hope you can see it. There is this overclock and normal functioning, and it's just a toggle switch, and I toggled it to overclock. So you have these two settings right here, two different BIOSes as a result. So this will run basically normal, run at stock, I think, or maybe limited boost clock even. OC will do the boost clock and plus whatever you want to add on to it. Other than that, it's okay. It is longer. It is a bigger, longer card. If we put these roughly side by each, again, we are looking at, about 1.5 inches longer or so. So that's something to consider. Not going to be a big factor in my case, but maybe in some cases, smaller cases, that will be an issue. In terms of thickness, these guys, I would say visually, are about the same. So, dare I stack these and put them like that. I'll put this one on top, it won't hurt it. They appear to be, about the same thickness. The one thing though, this has, there's 3 possible support slots here for the back, and there's only 2 on this. So I'm hoping I don't see any sag. I mean, this looks like a stronger plate, quite honestly, but we'll see. We'll check out to make sure there's no GPU sag when I actually stick this in. So yeah, but a little bit longer, about the same thickness, but the weight is different. So that was curious. So let's have a look at this. This guy, and I have my little scale over here, you probably won't be able to see it very easily in the video, but you'll have to trust me on this. I'm going to put this guy on my zero balance scale, and we get, let me center it, almost 1,600 grams, 1585. Let me get it right on. Yeah, 1585, 1586. So yeah, almost 1,600 grams. So a little under 4 pounds. That's a hefty card. That's that one. Now, let's see what this one weighs. It's lighter, but it's not a huge amount lighter. So zero balanced on the scale again. And well, yeah, it's 1265. So, not quite a pound lighter, but let's say towards 3/4 pound lighter. So yeah, there's a difference here, and keep that in mind that when you put this in your case, that this is a heavy card, and when you pick them up, there's no doubt that this one is the heavier card. So with that said, I think that's all I really want to cover on the physical aspects of it, and I think we'll now proceed to put it in the case. Hi, there actually is another thing I want to tell you about, and that is connecting up the 3080. All you need to do is use one of your unused Y 8-pin connectors that has 12 pin on going into the power supply and then ends in the two 6+2 connectors. You just need to back one off, leave it in the case, and use the other strand. And then you have another 2 8 pins with the other Y strand cable. I verified this with EVGA to be sure it was okay to do, because I saw some various opinions on the web as to whether this was okay. I got 2 responses from EVGA, and they basically said, and the first one was very confusing, wasn't clear as to whether I should be doing this or using 3 individual 8-pin strands, not Y connected. Then I said, okay, let's be clear. Can I use my Y connectors like for SLI that you have in a modular power supply for SLI? And the second response was yes, no problem. That's okay to do. So I just wanted to clarify that for folks, that is fine way of connecting 3 cables to the 3080. Okay, so we're installed here. And doesn't appear to be any sag of the GPU. It seems to be pretty firm, and there's good clearance between my sound card, which I'm happy about, because I'm one of those guys that likes sound cards still for decent sound. I had to get a little creative with the cabling. As you can see, I had to come in through one of the
blank drive trays that I'm not using. Simply because one of that third cable wouldn't reach. I mean, that's a standard length that comes with your power supply, and it simply wouldn't reach unless I went to the through there. So if you look around the back here, this is a Dark Base Pro 900K, so there's a lot of room, but the cabling, as you can see, is pretty tight back here. And there's not a lot of clearance for that panel that goes on back here. So anyway, it worked. It's not the prettiest. Cabling in the back never really is, but it at least is in there. And now we'll fire this puppy up. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about really is CPUs that you might consider if you're buying a 3080. And this is a nice little summary from Tom's Hardware at the link at the top of the screen here. And basically what this says at 4K for the average of 9 games, there really isn't a lot of difference here between a 9900K, which is running in this, in my case, and the older, well, fairly old now, 4770 overclocked. So they're all above 60, so that's the good news. The only thing I could see here is that if you have a more demanding game that with RTX shadows or on, and you're, maybe you're just above 60 or getting to 70 with the 3080, your CPU may hold you back. So my suggestion here is simply, if you can, it would be nice to be in somewhere in the Core i9 or Core i9, maybe 9600, or Core i5 8th generation and up, sort of somewhere in there. I would suggest would not bottleneck you too much. Anyway, that's nice to say, not always easy to do because that may require a CPU for you. Now, the other issue is this capacitor problem with some of the 3080-90 crashes. And it comes down to some of the add-in board manufacturers using a certain type of capacitor, or all of one type of capacitor, and not another, and not mixing them up. And so head on over to TechSpot at this address at the top, and you can read more about the details of that, because I'm not going to, there's a lot of stuff on this. You've probably heard about it. I'm not going to go into detail here. But I will tell you that on the RTX for 3080 for the win, they've done it right. And EVGA has made a point to say that they ship no cards, no for the win 3s to any consumers with all of the MLC type design. What you see here is a mixture of 4 POS caps and conductive polymer tantalum solid capacitors, as well as MLCCs, multi-layer ceramic chip capacitors, which are in the center. So we have 4 and 2, which is pretty much the recommended design from NVIDIA, and this is important for stability at higher clocks. So that's why you're seeing some reports of some boards, 3080s, crashing at higher clock speeds. Not to worry with the for the Win 3 and other cards from EVGA, as I understand as well. All good. Now, the other thing that is sort of the elephant in the room here is power consumption with the 3080s. It's kind of well known that these are power hungry, and you have to consider your current PSU capabilities. So I've gone ahead and used this out from outervision.com power supply calculator, and I've put in, it's a detailed, you can run this in basic or detailed mode, and I did it in detailed mode and put all my components in here, right down to SSDs and etc. and DRAM modules. And so for the RTX 2080, you're requiring, it's suggested that you need 534 watts for, that's not even overclocking, right? We're just talking standard stock speeds. Now, you probably say, okay, maybe a 650 in that case, just for a bit of headroom. And you're looking at about $54 a year at to run this at, I guess based on an average use. at 11 cents a kilowatt hour. Now that varies obviously depending on where you are, and I pay less than that. But keep this in mind that this is also something that is a factor. And we're in the orange here; we're not in the green. None of these cards really are, but okay, just that's what it is for the 2080. Now, when we move to the 3080 with everything the same, now we're looking at a 694 watt requirement. So you'd probably want an 850 watt power supply here. Maybe 750 get away with it, but with overclocking, you be pushing the limit. And again, we're back down here in the well, actually, I don't know why that's not orange, but 80, not very super efficient anyway, and a little bit more money per year, $15 or so, I think it is. Yeah, we'll call it $15. Not a substantial amount in cost, but it is an energy consumption nonetheless. So something to think about, whether your current PSU setup is capable of 3080. Because if you want to run the new overclock BIOS from EVGA, and this is courtesy of Jacob over at EVGA's forums, so thank you, Jacob, for this. There are two options, the BIOS normal and BIOS overclock. Now and you can basically just download and install these and for both, or one or both. But here's the rub. This update will increase the power consumption while overclocking, and is recommended you have an adequate cooling and power. Fair enough. So 850 watt gold minimum. That's what I have now. I have my PSU is a Corsair AX Gold 850. So yeah, that's if you want to run this at up to 450 watts is what you'll get with the OC BIOS. That's a hefty requirement, and I would say a lower percentage of PC users have that kind of power. So okay, that's something to note. And I first found out about it. I just wanted to have a little bit of a shout out to folks over at Electronics who done a series of great videos, who first pointed out this issue, and they've gone ahead and done some testing. And that black circle's moved, unfortunately, but what we're looking at here is that the power for the board with that overclock is, just like I said, it's 455. So you need a lot of power. So go ahead and watch this video. It's quite useful. The new 450 watt XOC BIOS. Now, just as we get into some of the comparisons here with the 2080, I thought just to mention that I'm running this on maximum performance, and this actually has an effect on the power draw because it's going to be running at maximum performance. And I don't have any low latency mode toggled on, so it's off. So there's buffering going on. But at idle, there's a difference here. So on the left, we have the optimal power setting that you can choose from the NVIDIA control panel. And when we're just idling, we're not using a lot. Max up to 95, but really low draw. And the clock speed is quite low as a result. Average of 250, but that's a boost just because of an instant. But when you move over to the performance power settings, the max ones I just showed, you're looking at a GPU power of about 100 watts. So it's a little bit more. Oh wow! It is 80 watts more just sitting there, but it's running at 1800 megahertz just at idle. So just keep in mind, if you choose the maximum performance, it does have an impact on power usage. That's kind of straightforward, but I thought I'd mention. So just to show you some of the overclock settings I have for the 2080, a little bit on, 125 in the core and not much on the memory. And just so it's referenced there, and noting that I have a fan speed curve for the GPU, so temperatures won't vary between the cards too much. And I'm going to show the results in the upcoming frames, and I'm just going to let them play through, so pretty self-evident. So to summarize, in terms of non-FPS outcomes, the temperatures between these two cards really were the same, and the max boost was, at stock was slightly better on the XC Ultra, but that's comparable, and we might see with new drivers and everything that change to be about the same. The max boost clock overclocking, I would say, is identical here, because I only put 50 on the core clock with the 3080. I haven't played around with this enough yet to feel confident with just throwing 100 at it. Probably would be no problem, but I just put 50 for now. So if it was 100, it'd be virtually the same as the 2080. And of course, there's a difference in the max power draw for these two cards. So that's just a little summary there. And then this is more or less what I just said, just to show you that, there's more power being used and to maintain those clocks. So we come down then to the near end of this video is, should you buy a 3080? And there are some pros and cons to this, really. The pros are, of course, the performance is twice a 2080. The same price as a 20... the 3080 is the same price as a 2080 was in 2018. In these two cards, there's obviously a slight difference in price, because one's a Ford the Win 3 and one's an XC Ultra, one model down from the FTW3. You do get the Ampere architecture. You have the option for the new OC BIOS. You have what I'm going to say the same overclocking headroom as a 2080 XC Ultra, which I'm happy to see, because I found the 2080 XC Ultra a great overclocking card, if not one of the best ones that you can buy in that series, the non-Super series. The aesthetics are good, and really there's no need to overclock the 3080 for 4K. There's showed there was one frame difference anyway with 100 even on the 2080, so it's not really worth it. The cons are the power consumption is high. Could be a capacitor issue, so be careful for that. Make sure that you are getting the mix of those types of capacitors I mentioned. The availability is still very limited, so hopefully you get one soon. I think a case size is important. I would suggest that you need a medium case, a large medium case at least. My Base Pro 900 is huge case, and it's great for airflow that way. And I think that's why I can see some good temperatures in my case. Here's the rub. You may need to buy a new PSU case and a 4K monitor, because really this card is designed for 4K. So if you're not there yet, it could be an expensive upgrade all around. And the card itself is relatively expensive. And then finally, we're back to two cables for two Y cable PCI connectors for, like SLI, for a single card, and three power connectors in this case for the Win 3. So those are some of the considerations. And finally, I would suggest you buy a 3080 if you're currently gaming at 4K and want to max the RTX and graphics settings potential, like I showed in the video here. But even in Tomb Raider, ultra shadow settings didn't crack 60 with a 3080, so we'll have to back that off for that particular game. If you're upgrading from less than a 2080 and moving into 4 gaming for the first time, this is the card to buy. So hands down, you should just do that. But if you're gaming at less than 4K, the other option is if you game at lower than 4K resolutions, but really want that high refresh rate and response and FPS. So that's the other case, 1440p, really high response. So, shooters, competitive online shooters. And you have the money to spend because, as I mentioned, these things aren't cheap and you may have to do other upgrades. So keep all these things in mind, folks. So basically, thank you for watching. And I haven't done a video in a while, so we'll look to see the future it holds and get you something more. So take care. and we'll talk to you next time.
You know